Thorpe. I hope you all had a safe and happy weekend, and we're very excited today to spend some time with Coach Brad Stephens. I don't have to go into his record. He's just generally known and generally known as one of the better young coaches we have in the world, as someone who follows the game everywhere. We're very lucky to have him here in the NBA. And if you've got questions, you can throw them into the little chat button in there. I don't know that we'll get to many. We have a lot of stuff to talk to Coach Stephens about, but please try and do so. And if you want to be on video, just type the word video in, and we'll see that and put you on. So without further ado, Coach Stephens, hello. How are you?
Hi, David. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I want to know how your family's doing, but first, every man has to ask this question these days: who is cutting your hair?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for asking. Our family's doing fine. As you and I talked about before we got on live here, you know, it's such a tough time for so many people, and your heart goes out to the healthcare workers and the people in the grocery stores and on down the line, first responders that are dealing with this every day, and the rest of us that are, and people that have lost their jobs, and the rest of us that are sitting at home and trying to help mitigate this thing and wait this thing out. You know, those are the small silver lining challenges we have, right? So the other day, we were just playing a game as a family, and I turned to my 10-year-old daughter and said, if you're ever going to try it, let's try it now. I want to see if you can learn how to cut hair. So she took a little bit too much off on the first couple swipes, and so that's why the hair is a little bit shorter. But she's on her way. You know, it's like we've all been forced to pick up some new skills and some new interests, and at the very least, we had a heck of a laugh about it, and it was a great experience. Probably better for her than me, but it'll grow out. It'll be fine.
You have inspired me. It's been I've been quarantined for quite a while. I'm in trouble. And my daughter used to fake cut my hair in the pool all the time when she was 9, 10 years old. Yeah. So I know she'd love to give it a try. We may have to do it. But I'm glad to hear things are going well. Are you doing a lot of homeschooling as a teacher right now?
We've got a pretty good e-learning set up through our schools. I've got a 14-year-old 8th grader, a 10-year-old 5th grader. You know, both of them are in their last years in their respective schools. And so, you know, this has been a transition for everybody in that regard, but they've done a good job with it, and our schools have done a good job with it. We do so a little bit. What I've really enjoyed with both of them is diving into their specific interests more and being able to spend more time with them. You know, my daughter and I, my daughter's got a ton of different interests, so we're all over the place, but my son really loves basketball. And, you know, I've watched a few high school games on film with him. We've had a few high school coaches talk to him. You know, he's getting ready for that next phase and that next step. And we're fortunate enough to have a hoop. So, you know, never before in 45-degree weather in Boston have you seen more people outside. And, you know, that's what we're doing to pass the time when I'm not on Zoom calls or working on stuff for our team.
Yeah. What are you doing now as head coach of the Boston Celtics? Like, what can you do to coach your team?
Yeah, it's really, obviously it's interesting. I think first and foremost, we're all very aware of what's most important now. And that is the health of everyone and the job we all play in continuing to mitigate the spread of this virus. And so we've talked about that a lot as a team. None of our facilities are open. You know, some of our guys, or I would say most of our guys, don't have access to a hoop. What we've put in place are virtual training sessions from a strength and conditioning standpoint, virtual training sessions from a ball handling standpoint, and fun meetings, you know, where we're getting together and being able to see each other's faces over Zoom, and talk about things outside of the sport, more of a big picture thing. I think one of the things that this entire experience has done for anybody that's affiliated with the game is it makes you realize how very lucky we are to play, and how very lucky we are to be a part of it. It's pretty meaningless in the big picture of life, but it is a good distraction and diversion for people. And at the same time, I think we're trying to take this opportunity to just be able to see each other's faces. We usually bring in a speaker a week and have fun with that. But as far as the basketball side, I did all my postseason evaluations that I normally do.
Yeah.
Just did it after 64 games. And so if we resume the regular season at some point or resume the playoffs, if we ever get to that, it'll be interesting to see how that exercise benefits or not. It may be, something that, in years ahead, maybe you take the time in the middle of a season to, look at almost the end of the year analysis early,
Right.
so you can get a better viewpoint as you go into, the playoffs and the meaningful time of the year.
Right. So I know that we don't know what's going to happen, right? Maybe you got regular season game, postseason games, but is there anything you saw in that process? They're like, hey, that was either a surprise to you, good or bad, for your team.
No, tremendous exercise, and I always go back through all of our close games and really, really hammer them out and dial them down. We had some games late in the season, right before we were all quarantined, where we did not play well at the end of games. We had some games at the beginning of the season where we played great. It's funny, right? It's supposed to be the opposite of that. And but I think that there were common themes in both of those scenarios and situations that we can hope to avoid or, use again in the good scenario where we can move forward if we get a chance to play again. And if not, it's good to know for the future.
Have there been any players that have kind of stepped up as leaders in this very unique situation whereas maybe in the locker room setting, younger players might be a little less inclined to speak up, but we're all at equal playing fields on Zoom. Are there any guys that surprise you with their eloquence or anything?
We've got a bunch of guys. We are big on, Dave. We big on everybody leading authentically and everybody having a voice and everybody taking ownership. And that is from the rookies on through. We only have, 2 30-year-olds on our team, Brad Wanamaker and Gordon Hayward. Kimba turns 30 in May. So we're still a very young team, and we want everybody to have ownership and have a voice. And that's throughout the whole year. So I think they're pretty used to that. Some of our loudest are some of our youngest. And so I think that that's fun. And at the same time, I think they all also know, there are things that you lean on Walker, Hayward, and Wanamaker for just because of their experiences and what they've lived up to this point.
So forgive me, Coach, for not remembering. If you recruited Gordon Hayward, were you recruiting him as the head coach?
Yeah, the first family that sat in my office as a recruit when I was the head coach, a few weeks after I got the job were the Haywards. And we didn't offer him a scholarship at the time. I had watched him play a little bit as a junior in high school, and he was intriguing, 6'6", 6'7", long, could shoot it, smart, didn't realize how bouncy he was. Went and watched him in a workout a few days later. And right after the workout, called his high school coach and told him he had a scholarship offer to Butler. And, from that point on, it became a little bit of a fight with some other schools just because he blew up quickly. He was clearly a late bloomer. But he got his decision done in 6 weeks and then didn't even play AAU. That summer, he played tennis that summer to try to win a state tennis championship. So he was really under the radar, and we were fortunate that he was. And then I think one of the benefits of that is that when he got to college, that was really the first time that he had focused solely on basketball. And so there was a real passion for it and a real passion to work at it. And there were a lot of new things. And, he's obviously taken off since and had a remarkable career.
But you've been in a very unique situation in that you recruited a 17-year-old and now get to coach him at 30 and have had him for a bit now. So we're all, in a sense, what you do, what I do, we're in the projection business, right? You didn't think he could help you win a championship when he was 17. You were looking 4 years forward, right? 2, 3, 4 years forward. NBA has got some similar things, obviously. So think about him at 17. Did you think this is who he'd be if you ever thought about it much as a grown-up?
We did. It's funny. He's one of the very few that we brought in as a recruit and said, your career is going to last past college. If you do all the right stuff, you've got a chance to be special. And And I think the reason why we said that with him, and we weren't able to recruit guys that were as physically gifted often. He was under the radar again. And so here is a 6'7", he had grown to 6'8", probably by the time he committed to us in June. The
Wow.
difference with him that I remember vividly was they were doing just a simple chair drill where they were going inside out as a chair on the right hash, driving it, jumping off the left foot and finishing. And he's dunking it at 11 feet off the left foot.
Wow.
And he goes the other way and he goes inside out with his left hand and he dunks it off the right foot at 11 feet.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, I'm not sure how many guys I've ever seen do it equally. And you already knew that, he was a great student. He had good skill, not great skill. He had to work on some of that. So really the question was, would his confidence level and grit level, where would that end up? Because you hadn't seen that as much just because, he was young and I hadn't seen him play live very much. And those questions were answered really quickly. The confidence really grew in the senior year of high school, led his team to a state championship, and went through a gauntlet of teams that were, Indiana's
Really
finest. And
yeah.
when you do that, and then you perform in Banker's Life in front of all those people, that's a pretty good sign that you can handle it.
So, Coach, if I asked Gordon, what was Coach Stephens like when you were 18 and now, separate from just the difference in the leagues, what would he say, do you think?
Oh, probably more of a pain now.
Really?
Would be what he would say. I think we were all learning and growing together at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, that literally was our first recruiting class, and but what great memories. And it's fun to coach him. But it's interesting because he's been here. This is his third year in Boston. The first one was obviously really tough. The second one, our team, we didn't play as well as a team as we would have wanted to. And this one's been really good thus far, but who knows how it'll end, if it'll get a chance to end. But, he's been here 3 years, but guys like Marcus Smart have been here 6 years. Jaylen Brown's been here 4 years, and I've coached those guys almost as long as Gordon. It's funny how that's all come full circle. But it's been fun to watch not only him, but all those guys at Butler go on. We had a Zoom meeting with our 2010 team the other day that was organized by Ron Nord, who's an assistant coach for the Hornets. And we had four, my whole staff was on there. So we had four assistant coaches, myself, and all the players. And of the players, there are 5 more coaches in the group. There are a few more still playing, and all the rest of them are doing great at the industry and job they've chosen. So that was a special group.
So we both no question of that. I remember getting an argument with Mike DeCourcy, who was a dear guy. I actually sat with him at John Gross's wedding. And I believed your team, the George Mason team, I thought that was a sign that mid-majors there was a good number of mid-majors, about as good as any high major. And we're going to see a lot more of them winning in the NCAA tournament going longer than before for different reasons. Yeah. And I think your team helped with that a lot.
Well, and I don't know, and I think maybe as much as anything, the teams that I was a part of in the early 2000s, when we first met, where we had Joel Cornette and Brandon Miller and Thomas Jackson and guys like that. Guys. I mean, on down the line, we had terrific teams. Those guys gave everybody in our room belief. They gave everybody in our building belief. And I think that builds up over time. And, soon you're all giving each other belief, and now it's just an even playing field. And the NCAA's tournament's different because it's the thing where a team that is not quite as well known plays with all the pressure in January and February, and then can let its hair down and really play in March. And the pressure's on the higher seed, the pressure's on the bigger school. It's a different dynamic than anything else. And if you're at a quote mid-major, that doesn't really matter when the score starts 0-0. And I would have really enjoyed watching the tournament this year, because I thought there were a few teams that were outside of the quote Power 5 that would have had a heck of a chance.
So you remember we talked before we came on the air that our first meeting was at the Final Four in Minneapolis, and you remember the way I remember it. If you could share with that, I'd love to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, it was great. It was my first year in coaching. I was a director of basketball operations at Butler, and like most director of basketball operations, I was so excited to get a chance to meet other coaches, because I was anxious and wanted to move on and maybe get a job as an assistant coach somewhere. So this was my chance, just like everybody else that goes to the Final Four, to meet people. And so I went with Thad, who was the head coach at Butler at the time, and John Gross, who was his recruiting coordinator. And I'll never forget, we picked up Sean Miller, who was Thad's buddy at the airport, and we all went. And I'm 23, and I'm just listening and latching on to what these guys are talking about. Sean's little brother, Archie, who may have just finished at NC State or was still playing, maybe.
I think it might have been just finished, yeah.
Yeah, and so I remember going down to sit at this bar in the early afternoon and grabbing lunch. And I think we ate 3 meals there. We were there until it closed, whenever it closed.
Yep.
And, you came through. I was talking to Chris Holtman the other day. I'm pretty sure Chris Holtman came through. I know Jimmy Christian came through, all of Thad's buddies from Miami of Ohio when he was with Syndec. And so the amount of people I met in that day was amazing. And, it was probably as good of a networking day as I've ever had. And it was just, sitting around, the same meal 3 times.
Yeah. We're doing a lot of sitting around now too. But before I forget, I just had memories of you being so earnest, and I really did think you were paying attention. A lot of times at those networking kind of events, everyone's looking over your shoulder to see who else you can meet. I always felt like you were very present, and because we had more than a few meals together in that group, and you're always just very present to the conversation. And I know that's something that's helping you as a coach now. Your players believe that you care about things. It's not just about how many shots they're making.
Well, I hope so. I think that's one of the things that's, hard, because you only get so much time, especially at this level. You only get so much time with the guys in the off season. And once the season starts, it happens quick. And, the noise can get loud, both good and bad, if you're having success or you're not doing as well as you want. And I think sometimes it's hard to stay in the moment. And I think one of our jobs as coaches or people just in the organization in any role is to just stay in the moment, be yourself, do the best you can, and hopefully be a part of an environment that values that as well. And then hopefully the guys see that.
Well, I know that when I've talked to players that you've coached that have played for a lot of other coaches, or I've had players who played with former players of yours, 2 things pretty much come out. One is they're very impressed, Brad, with your X and O stuff. And I do want to ask about, what is it you do to build your craft on the X and O side? But also, and my partner, Henry Abb and I were talking this morning about the TV version during games of Brad Stephens, and just a very calm, poised demeanor. But you're a basketball coach, and you've learned from some people. I'm going to ask you about that too. How different is that between what we see and what really you're doing most of the time?
Yeah, I think I get a kick out of the whole Brad Stephens, even keel, never loses his cool demeanor thing. I laugh at that. I mean,
so do your players.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like most of you. I talk trash at every card game I play with my kids. I don't want to ever get beat by my 14-year-old in one-on-one. And you don't get in this because you don't like the scoreboard. I think the reason that I ultimately left the corporate world to get into coaching was I missed the scoreboard and I missed being part of a team. And those 2 things were, my drivers for wanting to become a coach. And so I think that's always going to continue to be the driver. There's nothing I like more than working with a group of people and then achieving something together with a tangible score that you can see above you. And then I forget the first part of your question. So that was the second part of the question.
Yeah, no. So I want to talk about X and O's, but
Okay.
I want to pick up on that. You talk about, so you're a very competitive guy, right? And to coach in this game, you have to be. There's not a lot of ways to scratch that itch right now. So at home, our partner Judy, who you met earlier, she wants to know, what are you watching during this time? And I'm curious, are there competitive stuff you're watching with your family? I'm sure you're playing some games. Yeah, what are you looking at? What are you guys doing?
Everything's competitive.
Yeah.
Right. So we card games that the 4 of us can all play. We do board games all the time. We'll get in and play some video games down in the basement together. We've got the spike ball set up that some people play on the beach set up in our basement.
Great idea.
We've got a basketball goal outside. We can scratch that competitive itch pretty easily around here, and all four of us are. And so it's every night there's two people that go to bed happy and two people that don't. And so that's pretty easy. As far as the basketball side, you want to play, but I think we also, we all have the perspective on basketball and NBA games and games of any kind, and the scores that are attached to them are pretty meaningless right now. And so, again, I think that, if we get the chance to play again, we'll be ready to play again. But there are more important things out there.
Are there any TV shows Hal Stevens is watching?
No, but we have sat down and watched a few more movies. I think we haven't got into too many of the Netflix series or anything like that.
Right.
My wife and I usually try to watch the news once the kids go to bed for a half hour, every day to just kind of catch ourselves up. But other than that, the TV's not on a ton. We're spending a lot of time together doing a lot of different things. If the TV is on, it's sometimes in the form of video games.
Yeah. What are they playing?
My son plays all the PlayStation games. And sometimes I'll go down there and sit with them and just watch. Or I've actually got you'll appreciate this, I've got one of those old school Pacman machines.
Really?
That is a sit down version that they used to have in the pizza parlors.
Yeah.
And I have that in my basement next to it. It's got Miss Pacman, Frogger, Galaga, you name it, it's got it.
Oh, I love that. I've seen those things too. My son is the worst video game player of all of his friends because he's normally working on his game. And he's a little limited now because of what's going on. And so he's playing Fortnite, and all I hear him do is complain because he's not good. Or NBA 2K, he's not good. He tried Madden. He had never played Madden and never played football. I wouldn't let him play football growing up. So he doesn't know any of the words. We don't watch any football in the house, only basketball. And he's just terrible. So when he finally beat probably a 5-year-old, he was so excited. He told me all about it.
Among the other things that we all have to evaluate as parents and figure out, right, is the value of the video game.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's interesting because when I was growing up, when you went to play a video game, you went to the basement by yourself or whoever was with you. And that's the group that played. You didn't have anybody else you were playing with. Now, at this time, it truly is a social outlet.
It's amazing.
And my son and a bunch of his friends play on there, not too long, but long enough that it's a little annoying every day.
Yeah.
But it's a great way for them to stay connected throughout all this. And I think that's one of the things we've all learned with Zoom and other ways to connect is we have to figure out ways to stay connected.
That's a great point. I've got twins. So my son, that's how he connects with all of his teammates, both old teammates as well as new teammates. I mean, going back to 6th grade, he'll play with some guys. And my daughter doesn't have that because she doesn't play any of those things. So she started doing like a coffee happy hour with her friends on Zoom or FaceTime because they just had never – guys, it's a little easier for them sometimes through these sports games. And the only way teenagers can make it through right now, like all of us, is we need to have time to outlet to our friends. Coach, I want to ask you, if you were writing a book called The Marcus Smart Experience, what would you be writing about? Because I happen to be a tremendous fan and did not – when he was first coming out, I was evaluating him. I loved his game. There were some off-court issues that had me concerned, and I think I was wrong to be concerned because what I loved most about it was exactly what the NBA needs. But you've coached him now, like you said, it's 6 seasons. What would be in that book about the Marcus Smart experience that maybe we wouldn't always see?
Well, the thing that you would see that it would start with is he's a real competitor. Yeah. And when you talk about or you try to define levels of toughness, whatever the highest level, he's the highest level. He's a home run hitter. I think that would be a big chapter in his book about hitting home runs and swinging for the fences. And I think that those are things in his competitive nature and his competitive character that have helped separate him. Now, there are times, and he'll be the first to tell you, where, he'd like to have a play back or two. But the overwhelming narrative of him is how he positively impacts the locker room, positively impacts the game. And, we all look for in this game people that add value to winning. And, I've been fortunate enough to be in the NBA now for 7 years, and our first year was very much in a building phase as we were moving a lot of pieces, and really first 18 months. But Marcus got here the second year, and we've been in the playoffs every year since. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I mean, he is a winner. He adds value to winning.
How does he add value? How does he add value?
Well, I think first and foremost, he defines himself as a stretch six. Maybe that's why I don't want to make that the title of his book. He can write his own autobiography called Stretch Six. But I think he's willing to accept whatever role it takes to help your team win. And I think that, obviously his defensive instincts are special. His ability to defend is special. There's a reason why he's talked about as defensive player of the year, but he understands the game on both ends of the floor.
Right.
He's constantly improved his offensive game. His passing and vision have always been really good, and his shot has really become very good over the past few years. And that's been the result of a lot of work and a lot of time. And, but he also understands that, there are times where in the game where we need him to be the guy that gets everybody else involved and going. And there are times where, people are struggling and he can step up and make plays that can help kind of stem the tide. He's one of the best I've been around when things aren't going well at making a big basket or making a big play to stop the momentum of the other team. And,
super important.
Sometimes that's when you're down 15 in the first half and, he makes a big three, gets a steal, gets a layup. Or maybe the other team is coming back and cut an 18-point lead to 6. He goes in and drives in and gets an and one or gets a rebound and kicks it out for an open three to a teammate. He's got that natural ability to impact winning. And, again, I think we've all benefited greatly from that.
Is that what you mean by him being a home run hitter? Like he really goes, because I know what that means in baseball. My son played high-level baseball for a long time. How do you describe that for him?
I think there's something too, even as a younger player, when he wasn't shooting as high of a percentage, we always talked as a staff. We want him to have the confidence to step up because he's the one that will not be afraid of the moment and make a big one, right? And I think that that's something that is part of being a home run hitter. Again, I think and it's funny because I always say to our team, hit singles, but you need that guy in there.
Yeah.
You're not just going to put 9 guys who hit singles in the lineup. You're going to have the 4th guy up there swinging. And I think what he's done over time is he's become better at balancing when to swing for the fences and when to just make the simple, right, easy play. And I think that that's where, all of his greatness is in small details, effort, toughness, the mental side of the game. That's where his true separators are. And, as his skills continue to catch up, he's really become even better and better.
So, Coach, how is it that you developed? How do you develop a defensive mindset for the group? Because I think Marcus, whatever you're doing, my guess is he's enhancing that. But as a coach, how do you go about creating that mindset?
Well, first of all, you have to have guys that really buy in, that are some of your best players. And Marcus has been here for 6 years, so that helps right off the bat, right? I think that if winning's important, then you'll defend. Because it really is, right, the way that teams build. It's the way that you build trust amongst one another. It's a way that you build reliability together. And I think that, when teams are at their best and really defending, there's a certain almost spiritual phase that you reach in a game. And I think that's something that, was ingrained in me early on as a coach. I was a horrible defender as a player. I probably didn't have much interest in it. And, I've learned right away from coaching that, there's a lot of things that you can control on the defensive end of the floor to give yourself a chance to manage and your margin for error. And so if you've got a team that's not quite as talented as the team across the floor from you, if you're great with your techniques, if you're great with your system, if you're great playing together, if you've drilled every situation, and yet you can read and react and fly around when the time is needed because you play with multiple efforts and you have the savvy to do so, you can be special. And, it's funny because we've had some teams where people didn't think we were going to be as good defensively. And, those have been some of our better teams.
Yeah.
We've had to be a little bit unique, and be structured a little unique to be structured around our strengths. And, if the guys in any team situation, in basketball, it doesn't matter what kind of defense you run or what your rules are or whatever the case may be, as long as guys are fully bought into it and play it with multiple efforts, it's going to have a chance to be successful.
Would you say there's a phrase or two that's most common coming out of your mouth when you're coaching guys up in practice or games at either end?
I mean, do your job is obviously one. Hit singles.
That's not, by the way, that's not said casually. I know how important what you're talking about. Do your job.
It's so important to be reliable.
Yeah.
I mean, again, trust happens when reliability is built, amongst the whole group. And again, that's why I'm big on letting everybody have ownership and having a say, because we want everybody fully invested and understanding what your job is, what your responsibility is, and how it impacts the whole is really important. And, people that cannot score, teams that cannot score, on a few possessions in a row, but still get back and really guard, have a chance. They have a special quality about them that give them a chance to win.
Yeah, Daryl Morey talks about that it's hard to play defense when you're not scoring. It takes a special thing. Yeah. As you know, I live in the Tampa Bay area and went to Buccaneer games for years when they were good. Mm-hmm. Our defensive coordinator might be the first ever Hall of Famer that was a coordinator only. Monty Kiffin, his son Lane's pretty famous. Mm-hmm. And when the local papers would talk to defensive players year after year about what is it about Tampa that's so good, when Dungy was there, when Gruden was there, they all said Kiffin just really demands everyone do your job.
Yeah.
You have to trust they're doing their job. You're doing yours, and you're totally bought into that. I think it's when Thibodeau's teams were really good defensively. I always felt like everyone knew exactly what they were supposed to do on almost every possession with all the different variable things you see, and they just did their job. And I talked to players about that. And I think when you've had success, because you mentioned this, people that even experts that weren't sure the Celtics would be a plus defensive team, top 10, they were. I think it's because you really help teach this is what we're going to do.
Well, and nothing happens without that multiple efforts. The players are the key to the whole thing, right? The buy-in and the multiple efforts.
Right.
And so that has to start with them, and it has to be something that's really important to them. You talk about the phrase, do your job. I mean, nobody does that better than right down the road here in Foxborough with Belichick.
Yeah.
And so, it's been fun to go over and watch them work and watch them go through that whole, every day it's about controlling what you can control and then letting the chips fall where they may. And I think that's ultimately the business we're all in. And you prepare and prepare and prepare and work and work and work to try to put yourself in position to, control what you can control in a 1-point game that's dependent on some randomness and some bounces.
Right.
But that's the way it goes. And I've certainly been the fortunate recipient of more bounces than the other way around. And but you do, the magic is in the work, as my good friend Ron Adams, who used to work here, used to say.
Yeah. Would you say there's any phrases that you say a lot as a dad?
I would say that our kids probably hear the same things that you say a lot as a coach. I think, being able to, we try to harp on being a great teammate all the time.
Yeah.
And, I've told my kids, both of my kids, you'll never hear me say a peep in the stands. I know how hard a coach's job is. You'll never hear me yelling at an official, because I probably wear our officials out enough that I don't need to yell at an official in a kid's game. And the only time you'll really hear us critique, you is if you don't give a good, true effort or you show yourself to be less than a good teammate.
Yeah.
And so those things are really important to us. My wife's in the same boat as far as those things are the things we talk about at home.
I couldn't agree more. I want to ask you, Coach. I don't know for sure that I'm right, but if I was guessing at which team played the most zone defense this year, I would have guessed Miami. I think I could probably look this up, and I just haven't. But
Mhm.
just watching games, how much zone do you think you all played this year? What's your thoughts behind that? And I want to get your opinion too. I think you're an excellent, an elite defensive coach. Where might the game go that way?
Well, this is an interesting question. I don't know what the stats say either, but Miami's way up there. I mean, Brooklyn's played a lot,
Yeah,
but
right,
I mean, you're seeing it, multiple times a week now. Whereas, my first year in the NBA, you might see it once a month.
right.
And I think that that's where, people are trying to figure out how do we protect the rim, not foul, and get out to these 3-point shooters. And there's so much more ground to cover. And all of these players have been so well drilled through the years, all the way through high school, college, the individual workout guys they work out with, and their coaches once they get to the NBA to read scenarios and be able to read different coverages of man-to-man defense. And so it makes sense that, the mixing up of defenses makes those reads less, you know, harder to prepare for, I guess would be the right way to put it, right? There's a lot more of just, you know, being able to make the right read in that time with a lot more randomness on the defensive end. And so we've spent more time this preseason playing against zone than we ever have before. We would, allot at least once every other day to play a game to 10 against zone or to mix it in ourselves, because you kind of saw that coming throughout the end of the last couple of years. And as we headed into this year, certainly, Toronto played it at times throughout their run, but other teams have done it too. And we've done it. We've done it at times. We've played a little 1-2-2. We played a little 2-3. We do it on situations a lot where you'll go zone and then into man, or especially on the side and those types of things. But when I was at Butler, we went to the point where, my last 3 years there, I bet we didn't play man-to-man in 11, 12, or 13 5 times on baseline out of bounds. We were zoning almost every one. And so,
Really?
there's just so many ways to throw a curveball and to, to manage a game. But those are things you've got to work on too. And the great balance in coaching, as you know, is being able to have an identity on that end of the floor. And, for us, our identity has been in being able to be versatile in our man and mixing in some of those small zone ideas as curveballs. For others, it's, playing multiple defense as well. And that's hard to do. But, I think you mentioned Miami. Spo's a tremendous coach.
Yeah.
And their teams are always great offensively and defensively. And his, the way that they play, to me, when I watch them from the outside looking in, it all starts with we're gonna play with multiple efforts no matter what we're doing. And so that's the foundation. And then, they've got so many ways to go from there. They're hard to play against.
Yeah. I wonder if, I'm curious why 1-2-2 versus 2-3. Like, what's your mindset when you decide to do one or the other, or does not really matter? You just try to. The idea is the curveball. It doesn't really matter.
Well, I
what
think
the situation is.
to me, it depends on how the other team's aligned. Again, what you're trying to take away.
Right.
Maybe you're playing a zone because you're really struggling to guard them in a man scenario, and you're playing a 2-3, and they keep getting the ball still off pick and rolls to the middle of the floor, and you want to put another person up there
Yeah.
to handle that as an easy switch. But I think from our standpoint, you want to have those things in, or at least those things discussed. We played a little box and 1 at times this year. We played a little triangle and 2. My second year in the league in the playoffs, and I'll never forget, we played it against Cleveland, and we had a great possession where we were denying James and Irving, and Shumpert hit a contested 18-footer, and it's just like it was he's a good player who made a tough shot. but you were going to take the contested 18-footer. That was the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it works out in your favor and sometimes it doesn't. But, all in all, I'd say we're a lot more man than not.
Yeah, of course. And probably to some extent it always will be. Do you miss one of our viewers, David, is asking, what do you miss most about college coaching? Is that one aspect of it that it's almost like you have more freedom to try different things out defensively?
There's a couple things that you miss about college. Number one is when you recruit a player and then coach him for 4 years, there's a 6-year relationship there with every one of your players. We only had one person transfer when I was at Butler, and we never had, we only had 2 people that went to the league early. So everybody else was there. And so it was a great chance to build long-term, long-lasting relationships. When kids choose to go to college, they choose their school. They're not drafted into it. They're not traded to it. They choose to go where they're going. So there's already like this, understanding kind of what you're getting yourself into, right? And that's one of the things that I think it's easy to create a sense of purpose in college. Sometimes in the pros, that can be much more difficult, especially when you're in a situation where you're building and you're not winning as many games. That's a hard thing to do. But we're fortunate here that we've got this tradition and history behind us, all those banners on the wall, and a city that demands it. Like, the purpose is bigger than the individual. And I think that that's something that, there's a uniqueness about coaching in Boston and coaching for the Celtics that, I think mirrors in some ways the college experience, at least the college coaching experience. But the other thing I'd say about college coaching is that you can dig deeper into the preparation for opponents just because you have more time. I mean, the NBA, you have to learn how to balance your time so that you still get some sleep too.
I'm sure your wife and kids appreciate that. So, Coach, I have one more question. Then we have a video question for you from Gerard, who always comes on our show. I don't know that I probably haven't written this before, but you may know a friend of mine named Mike Moreau. Mike told me a story a long time ago when he was back running some IMG stuff. He was working out with Reece Gaines, and you remember Reece Gaines.
Yeah.
And Reece said it was number 16 pick maybe for the Magic. Maybe
played for Louisville.
Yeah,
was
Louisville, right.
We beat them in 2003 in the Sweet 16.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah.
So Reece was with Orlando and had not been playing real well. They brought in Doc, and Mike said to him, "Are you excited to play for a guy that played your position in the NBA?" And Reece had the most amazing answer, and I want to get your thoughts on it. He said, "Honestly, I don't really care where they played. I just want help getting to be the best player I can be." And it has such value to me. I didn't play past high school. What's your thoughts on just most players kind of feeling the same way?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, the key for, what I've always tried to do is work as hard as I can to be prepared for every situation so that I can, be as good for our guys as I can be. And again, you're just yourself and you let the chips fall where they may after that. But I think there's real value in people that have played at this level and their ability to communicate, what they lived, what they see, what they like. And I've seen that on our staffs. And, we've got multiple people that played at a high level. And I lean on them, for, especially as we're going through a tough stretch, what guys are really feeling like, because going through the 82 game stretch as a coach is really hard. And it's my first year. I remember it being the middle of March and being like, when is this going to end? And
hit the wall.
And can you imagine? And then I think about, when I'm tired, I think about what do those guys feel like, And so this truly is a player's game, and what they go through physically to get to the end of that season and then compete in the playoffs is a marathon. And so I think it's important that you do have people around you, if you didn't live it as a player, like in my circumstance, that you can lean on to help you with that.
That makes sense. So every time we've done a show, we always have Gerard come on at the end and give us a glimpse into his wisdom. So Gerard, welcome to the show, and here's Coach Stephens.
Thanks, Coach Thorpe. Coach Stephens, this has been great. I actually have 2 questions. Randy is DMing me to ask one of his son's questions. So Dylan asked, what's one of the hidden talents that your players has that the outside world doesn't know, but you know?
You mean one of my individual guys?
Yeah, whoever, Tatum, Brown, anybody, whoever.
Dylan said like Rajon Rondo's Connect Four
Right.
prowess.
Yeah, so something like that.
I don't know if anybody on our team I don't know if anyone on our team is as good at their endeavor as Rondo is at Connect Four. that would so I think that what you just said was the best example that I can think of. I've seen Rondo play Connect Four on a number of occasions, and I've never seen him lose.
Wow, he's a genius. Yeah.
He's really good. So my basketball question is, obviously, coaches, you look at time and score. You've got a million things going through your head at once. In the middle of a game, what are the emotions like when you're doing everything you can and a player's just cooking you, and you're like you throw your hands up? What's going through your mind when you're dealing with that?
Well, I think just like any other time, you're not thinking about it necessarily in that way. You're thinking about, okay, what is the risk reward of changing to stop them? So, if you're up 10 and a guy's cooking you, but you're scoring every time, is it worth doubling him and opening up the 3-point line to, introduce losing into the equation that way? Is it better to just change a matchup? Is it better to change a defense for a possession? Is it better to change out of a timeout just one small part of your defense? Those are all the things that I think you have to think about, and hopefully you've prepared throughout the season as you get into the playoffs for all those different scenarios so that you can reflect back as a team on, okay, remember when we did this, this is what we're going to do here if this guy really gets going. One of the things I think is unique about the NBA versus college is I always felt like in college you could go into a game with a plan, and if you executed it for 40 minutes hard and well, because of the lack of time and the skill levels not the same, it usually lasted all 40. Here, against the best of the best, better have a few different looks. And if you don't have a few different looks, it's certainly going to be a long series. Like the 7-game series are, the great ones. LeBron's seen everything. I mean, he's done it. So if you do something one game, he's going to be better against it the next, right? So I just think you have to have that fine balance of having a total belief in what you're all doing together, understanding that those great players are still going to make plays, but also being able to be malleable and change on the fly.
Are you quick, do you think, Coach, are you quick to make an adjustment on your team, you and your staff put together this great strategy, and you really think it's going to work at least for a while? You don't want to work for 48. Are you quick to say, you know what, scrap this?
I think there have been good examples of that, but there's also been examples where I've stayed with something too long. There's no question about it. I mean, I think you could look back and kick yourself for games throughout the last 13 years as a head coach where you stayed with you didn't choose it because you were ignoring it. You just stayed with it too long.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's not necessarily pride in like a plan. It's more like you still think it's the lesser of two evils.
Right.
And I think that's just a decision you have to make. It's easy in hindsight to second guess those, but as coaches, that's part of our job, to go back and reevaluate yourself and figure out where those moments were.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you so much, Coach, and Gerard and Judy. It's been an amazing time to talk to you, Coach Stephens. Of course, we wish you a safe and healthy week, day to day, week to week. We're all anxious to watch you coach again. And thank you so much. For everyone else, we'll be back here tomorrow, 11 o'clock, with Henry leading the way. Have a great day, everybody.